It had been nearly 2 months since all of this began, and they decided that Talion would stay and began looking for instructors and knowledge of how to teach him. And in that time, Melody's magical abilities had greatly improved, almost equaling that of her mother's. They were beginning to reach the limits of how much Melody could improve without beginning to collect other knowledge, find new magics to teach her, which was a dangerous proposition, and would divert from finding a teacher for Talion. But finally, something broke their way. Vera, in one of her discussions with her cohorts, the people that she had been doing business with, managed to get a bit of information that might prove useful for their little family. In conversation with this business partner, an individual came up in the discussion. Supposedly, he was a demon, one that, on previous occasions, had accepted orphaned children, trained them to fight and defend themselves, teaching them his knowledge and skill. These orphans, in turn, grew up to be quite well known, establishing powerful names in their communities as some of the strongest members of their individual demonic races. And thus this individual had begun to be known by many names. The one they were most interested in was the trainer of legends, someone who could teach nearly anyone, but chose his students seemingly specifically from places and situations that most would never bother to. Most people with talent and skill or ability use their reputation to find students from well-established families and situations, people who have noble birth, high levels of demonic ability. All of these things tend to increase a demon's status in the world, especially if they teach. And yet this individual simply seemed to ignore all of that, choosing students that no one else would ever have, under any circumstances. One of the most interesting things about him being his individual demon race. While there were many types of demons who wandered the demonic realm, there were always those of weaker birth. Some demons simply naturally possess more power than others. This is a simple fact known throughout the demonic world. And just as there are those that are stronger than all the others, like a succubus, known to be one of the most powerful forms of demon, there are also those known to stand among the weakest, to have little in the way of power or ability, the races that get stepped upon by all the others around them. One of these races was that of the siren. But lo and behold, one figure had begun to emerge in their ranks, defeating demons of much greater power, in conflicts in which everyone would simply assume that a siren would die outright. He, beyond all expectation, claimed victory against these titans, one after another. And those of the titan race had begun to gather, those of the siren race had begun to gather around him, for the first time having a somewhat powerful leader, someone who claimed respect even from powerful demons. And thus, for the first time in ages, sirens had found a safe place, even formed their own village, all surrounding this individual, whom they affectionately dubbed the Siren King, and followed without question. And despite what someone might expect of a king, this individual didn't bother hanging around or sitting on a throne. Rather, he acted as if a wanderer, traveling from one place to the next, no one ever knowing where he was going to show up next. But he had quite recently stopped appearing in the demonic world, and there were strange whisperings that he had found his way to the human realm, to Earth. After doing a bit of digging, Vera seemed to have nailed down a location for where this individual is supposedly located. And on this day, she was supposed to find him and attempt to negotiate a deal, see if he would be willing to train Talion in the ways of utilizing his power and abilities. Talion and his mother Melody were currently in the house, cooking a meal, preparing for supper. Hopefully, Vera would return with good news, a teacher for Talion, but they were uncertain of what bargain she would be able to strike with him. All they could do was hope that things went in their favor, and as they began to put the finishing touches on dinner, there was suddenly a black, shadowy energy that emerged in the room, swirling about, forming a doorway that they had become all too used to at this point, knowing immediately that it was Vera coming home. Both Talion and Melody stopped what they were doing for the time being, beginning to walk towards the door in hopes of welcoming grandmother home, but were surprised when a new individual stepped through the doorway. A tall man of average build, wearing a white cloak and white clothing, and white hair as well. Other than that, he looked human, having fair features. At least Melody thought so. He was a rather handsome man in her opinion, as she saw her mother step through the doorway right behind him. As the doorway dissipated in the background, the tall man simply looked around, seeming to take stock of everything around him, the room, the people, and then his gaze falling down to Talion. "So, this is the kid, huh?" he said, pulling back the hood on his cloak, revealing his short-cut hair, which was shock white, of course. His eyes were a dull gray color, and he carried a fairly warm smile. "Yes, this is my grandson, Talion. As I told you before, his father was a demon, so he's a half-demon. But he seems incapable of learning human magic, so we assumed that he might need instructions from another demon. As that is a dangerous proposition, I have been looking quite carefully for a new teacher. This world can be a dangerous place, and I'd like my grandson to be prepared for it," Vera said, confidently lying through her teeth. For a moment, the man simply stared down at Talion, his eyes very focused. As Talion stared back, he seemed to notice something. A glow of sorts. A dull silvery sheen. It almost looked like fog in the back of his eyes, and for a moment it felt like the man was glaring right through him, peering into the depths of his heart or soul or mind. It gave Talion a very strange sensation, making him feel wary, for a moment stepping back. "Well, those are good instincts, kid. You don't even know what I was doing, do ya?" he said to Talion. "You were looking at me weird," Talion replied, still trying to hold a strong stance. "Yeah, of course I was looking at you, but that's not all I was doing. I was reading you, kid. You didn't really know what it was, but you got strong instincts. You could tell that I was looking too deep. Your instincts kicked up. You backed away, sure, but your defenses also went up. A defensive reaction happened. Your energy started blocking itself off, throwing up walls. That's good. Damn good." You usually don't come across powerful instincts like that. And that's a good thing when you're looking for a student. Good instincts can take one a long way.